My name is Vikas Gopal Jhingran, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Satish Gopal Jhingran as part of the Foundation of Indian Studies project, where we are interviewing Indo-Americans who have been part of the Houston community in an oral history project. And we are partnering with the Houston library system for this. This is a particularly important interview for me because not only is Dr. Jhingran an important part of the Indo-American community in Houston, but also my uncle and a source of inspiration and guidance for many years for me. Dr. Jhingran, thank you for taking the time today for this interview.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I enjoy coming here and helping the project. And especially I'm happy that being my nephew, you're taking my interview. I could have given the interview to Nick, but I wanted you to take the interview.
That is my pleasure. Let us start with your early years. A little bit, can you tell us a little bit about where you were born and your early childhood years?
Well, I was born in Kanpur, which is part of UP, and we are 4 brothers, and the youngest is the sister, one sister. And actually you are the son of my 4th brother, the youngest brother, and early part we were in Banaras for a Montessori school. My grandparents were there, my grandmother was there. Then we moved to Ajmer and Indore, as my father was in education, and he was changing the training colleges there. Finally we settled down in Aligarh, which is also part of UP, India, and he was the principal of the college there. And we had a good experience in Aligarh, and we grew up actually in Aligarh, and I finished my high school there. And after that I moved to Kanpur to do my intermediate, as there was no biology at that time in Aligarh, except for the Muslim university, and my father didn't want to send me there. So I spent 2 years as an intermediate student in Kanpur, which is my home of my maternal grandfather. And then I moved back to Aligarh and did 1 year in Muslim University as in the bachelor's degree. And finally I was selected in the King George Medical College, India, where I spent 9 years doing undergraduate and postgraduate degree in internal medicine. And finally after doing all that, I moved to Banaras Hindu University as a lecturer in medicine. And there I was from 1963 to 68. And in 68 I decided that I need to specialize something in internal medicine to grow up in my profession. And nuclear medicine fascinated me because it was a very brand new subject in India, and also actually in America too. So I was selected as a fellow at MD Anderson Hospital in Houston, Texas. I moved here in July of 1963 in nuclear medicine, and I stayed at MD Anderson for 3 years as a fellow. In between, my family came in 1963 in the December to join me. By that time I have 2 children, and the oldest was the daughter, who was 6 years old, and the son, who was 2 years old. And now they are 49 and 46. After 3 years of my fellowship, I got immediate job in the Methodist Hospital, which is connected with the Baylor College of Medicine, as a lecturer or assistant professor actually, in internal medicine, but part of nuclear medicine. And after that, gradually I progressed there and became my chief, retired, and I became chief of nuclear medicine at Baylor and Methodist Hospital till I retired, which was in 2001.
So that is very interesting, but I'm particularly interested in finding out how you felt and how Houston was when you came here in your first few years.
Oh, Houston at that time actually was a village. It's a very small town. And the outer limit of Houston was 610, Loop 610. There was nothing beyond Loop 610. There was no Galleria or Westheimer even. It was known as a farm road. The only thing which outside 610 at that time was a Jewish community center which is in Bracewood. Otherwise, there was nothing there, and one of my friends called me at the Jewish community center. He lived close by, and it looked like we are in the jungle moving there. And since then, Houston has grown up. Now it's one of the fourth largest city of this country.
I also was very interested in finding out what your experiences were as an immigrant coming to this country, and were you accepted by the community? Was it a little difficult?
Because, tell you frankly, I had absolutely no experience about the indiscrimination in this country. People at that time were very friendly. Actually, I was scared when I was coming here because everybody in India was saying, you are going to the south, Houston. There's a lot of discrimination there, and what will you do there? But to my surprise, I mean, the people were so friendly, there was absolutely no discrimination. I never felt anything, and actually, climate-wise also, Houston was excellent, just like India, so I settled here very well. And I never, as a matter of fact, people are much more difficult now in Houston, and there may be some discrimination now in Houston, but at that time, I mean, the foreigners were very much welcome in Houston, Texas.
Now, initially, when you came to Houston, the Indian community was very small, probably. So how did you and others, or what did you and others do to keep connected to India, and how did you get more and more involved with the community and the social activities in Houston?
Well, the Houston community at that time, actually there was 10 or 11 professionals, and beside that maybe about 100 Indian students in the University of Houston. So there were very few Indians, and there was nothing like South Indian, North Indian. We were all Indians. And there were 5-6 doctors. I met the first doctors here. And they were also looking for somebody new face, and they were very happy to see me here, and we were all welcomed there. At that time, there were only professionals in Houston. There were doctors or the engineers. Most of them, the engineers were the chemical engineers with the oil industry. And we formed a group, and we started meeting with each other. There was no temple or anything at that time. So first thing we needed was to think about the religion. And so a group of about 10 or 11 people started meeting and started having Gita courses and Satnarayan Katha at that time. And Mr. Diwan was there, he expired there. And so we formed actually Hindu Worship Society at that time. That was the first society of the Indians, and it was only 10 or 15 members to start with. And then gradually the more and more people came here, and our Hindu Worship Society grew up. And then finally, instead of having our prayers at our homes, we moved to Rothko's Chapel. And in Rothko's Chapel, we had our prayers, and then the Indian student population has also increased by that time. Those students, they were hungry for the Indian food, and there was no Indian food there. So the ladies were cooking for the puja and for us to food, and they also prepared for the students. So there were a lot of students coming to the Rothko's Chapel to have a free lunch on Sundays once a month. And then later on, you know, whenever there are about 50, 60 Indians, there is always a fights. So now we were thinking about building some place to have a temple, and we could not decide. So at that time, Mr. Kannappan decided to move out from us and to have his own group of people to make a temple. And that's how the first temple was born, which was Meenakshi Temple. And then we were left with all the South Indians moving to the Meenakshi Temple. And finally, we did make a temple in the World Road. which is still there and is still one of the very old temple. And after that, the Arya Samajis started itching, and they thought that we should have this and Havan place and all those things. We said we can't provide it. So they separated out, and that's how you saw this Arya Samaj Mandir there. In the meantime, Meenakshi temple came. So that's the religious part of it. The other interesting part was that there was no music halls, nothing. So we were just going to University of Houston and seeing the movie once a month. And there were some students, but the professionals started getting into the University of Houston, and they started in the Indian Student Association. The professionals started getting in there, and they got the executive position, president, vice president. The students were set aside, and those professionals started fighting. And there was one election, and that was, I think, in '72, when there was a very big political fight for the president with Mr. Raj Syal and Pankaj Dalal. And there was actually became volatile also. And University of Houston academics come to know about it, and they disbanded us. They said Indian Student Association is only for the students and no outsiders were allowed. By that time the professionals were there, the engineers have grown much more, and because the visa eased, a lot of Indian doctors came also. So we were a big community by that time. So we decided what to do. So finally, in '73, we formed the India Culture Center. Dr. Harv here was the preliminary chair to form the constitution. Dr. Hare has expired, and I was the first president of the India Culture Center, which is still growing very well. And I was the president in 1973. So that's how we grew up. And further on, as the doctors increased, we decided to meet as Indian doctors. And Dr. Sharma, Dr. Matthew, and myself, three of us decided to have one informal meeting of the Indian doctors. And that was, at that time, I think there was Shamrock was still there, was about to be demolished. We had a meeting in Shamrock Hotel. We met there and we decided to have Indian Doctors Club, non-professional organization. And Dr. Sharma was appointed the first president of that. After that, that was in 1981. And then Nayanan Matthews was the second president, and I became the third president of the Indian Doctors Club, and which has also grown. And then we decided to make it non-profit, so now it is known as the Indian Doctors Association. In between, when I was the president there, and few years later, we were the first people to participate in the US politics. Mark White was standing for a governorship second time, and Ann Richard, both of them were from the Democratic Party. The state of Texas was still all Democratic Party at that time. There were no Republicans here, which is completely changed now. So we gave a lot of contribution to Mark White. Finally, Mark White lost anyway. And Ann Richard became the governor, and Ann Richard appointed me in one of the committees in Austin. In between, the Indo-American Physicians Association, API, American Association of Physicians of India, was formed, and Mr. Kothari was the person who started it, and I think that was their second year. It was very small actually. Besides Chicago, Illinois, there was nothing there in API at that time. Mr. Kothari had a son here, he visited here, and at that time I was the president, he contacted me. And he said, why not Houston joins the API? So after 2 or 3 years later, we joined. We were the second biggest organization after Illinois to join the API. And I was one of the board of directors in API. And I grew up in API for 8 or 10 years. And I was part of the API. I was part of the Constitution Committee and board of directors for 8-10 years. And in the year 2000, there was a big fight in API too, and I was in the wrong camp, so I lost there. I was standing for the vice president, but I did become the trustees for the API, board of trustees. They appointed me as the board of trustee after I lost as the vice president. And also, after the Indian Doctors Club was formed, there was a need to join all the group of doctors in the state of Texas. So we met in 83 or 85. All the state Texas doctors, we met in Austin, and we formed Texas Indo-American Society, Indo-American Doctors Society. What TIPS was this initial Texas Indian Physician Society or something like that. And I was the first president of the TIPS too. And then beside that, finally we grew up. As a matter of fact, during all this time, when I was the president of the HCCS, in 1973, Mr. Call was the ambassador of India, and he was visiting Houston. And that was the first Indian ambassador has come to Houston, first time. So Mr. Call, and we were supposed to give him a good
welcome,
a good celebration for him. So we arranged a dinner for him, and there were about 200 Indians at that time, and none of them have too much money for it. And so the ladies cooked food for 200 people, and we just charged $5 per person for the dinner.
Wow.
Which is unthinkable now, where the dinner costs $100 minimum. And it was a big reception, and we enjoyed very much. Later on, Rajiv Gandhi as the Prime Minister came here. We arranged a party for him, but that time we were rich people. And India Culture Center also, later on it grew. So Mr. Sindhwani, who just expired, we were meeting at, actually, our meetings were in the medical center. Actually, I had a big hall in the Methodist Hospital where we used to meet. But Sindhwani said the group is getting bigger, so he wanted to have in the ICC house. So actually, Mr. Sindhwani's effort, ICC house was bought. Actually, the initial money was given in 76 or 77, and we bought the ICC house, which is in the World Center at that time. And Sindhwani Saab and Sal Saab, they used to clean the house. There was not too much money in ICC at that time.
Wow.
They were cleaning the house, they were maintaining the house, and Indian classes started, and dancing and all those things started there. And after that, the Meenakshi temple also started Indian classes, and the Chinmayanand mission also started Indian classes. So actually this India House concept has been borrowed from the ICC house. And the India House took over the ICC part of it there. And we feel sorry about it, because it should be the ICC house. And basically, that's what I can tell you about.
That's wonderful. So
yeah, go ahead.
You talked about the religious side and how Houston grew with the Indian religions. You talked about the culture side, but I was very interested in also finding out how the food has changed since you came here into Houston. I'm sure when you came here in Houston, there were probably no, if any, Indian restaurants. And for vegetarians, how was it? Was it difficult to eat out, and how's that changed?
To tell you, I mean, when we first moved in '68, you could not get anything. There were no green vegetables even in state of Texas. They were all potato and beef eaters. We could not get anything there, and no spices, nothing, no masala here, no lentils or dals over here. So as a group, about 8 friends of us together, we used to order the food from the New York. All the groceries used to come for us from New York, and then in bulk, and then we would distribute it to each other. And there was no Indian grocery shop. The first restaurant was began here in Houston, and we were 5 people who decided to open a restaurant in Houston. There was no restaurant in the state of Texas, as a matter of fact, at that time. And that was Tandoor. And that was about, I think, in 80s we started that. And after that, now there are a lot of restaurants. And we ran it very well for 5 years, and we sold it. That's the first business venture of mine, and I made money in that. After that, I have never made any money. And also, with the political part and Indian politics, and a lot of us get involved later on in other politics, and now we are giving donation to every politician in Houston. We also became rich. I mean, Indians became rich, and then we started to give something to Houston back. So then again, 5, 6 of us met together, Vicky Mahindra, myself, Butcher, and Manoj Vakil, Arvind Bhandari, and we formed Indo-American Charity Foundation. And that was in 1988. And also that first meeting was held in the medical center. Shamrock Hilton was destroyed by 1988, but they still have a convention hall left. Dick Nickham must be knowing that. And our first meeting of the Indo-American Charity Foundation, first fundraising actually, was held in that convention hall. And now that also has become a big organization, and now a lot of charities are there.
Very interesting.
But the food, Indian food, still is about the same when we started it. It's the same type of food and same kind of food. But there are some good fancy restaurants that have come in.
Now let's go back to coming here and as an immigrant, and then adjusting to the Houston environment. I'm sure there were, on many occasions, you thought about whether my children growing up here, will they have the same value system that you were able to develop in India. Was that ever something that you thought about, and how did you approach that?
No, we thought about that, and as a matter of fact, Hindu Worship Society, the one purpose was to teach our children, the Indian culture, Indian values. And then we also had this, not a public Holi or public Diwali function, but we used to have pujas, Diwali and Holi and Janmashtami. So we kept our culture at home, and we taught all those things to our children, and they still know it. I mean, like my daughter, who is also a physician, and she's 49. She also does puja at home, and whenever she gets promotion or a bonus, she always goes to the Meenakshi temple and pay homage to the god. So at that time, actually, we cultivated a lot of Indian culture, much more than what is being cultivated today. And at those children, we were very proud of our children, actually, and somehow or other, the children know that they are different. They themselves know they are different. You don't have to tell them that you are different, and they understand it. And I never had any problems in the school of my children where my daughter would say that she is discriminated, or my son will say that he is being discriminated. Actually, it was all values, and they did all very well. So basically I never saw that problem. And I don't think anybody has seen that problem with the children.
They adjust very well to
They adjust very well, very easily, and you don't have to tell them. They themselves, the children, you'll be surprised. Children
That's
are
what
much
they
more intelligent than what the adults are.
in this respect. Another aspect of the Houston and the Indians in Houston, as you mentioned, are the different cultures and the different areas that of India that people come from, and they speak different languages, their foods are different. In the future, you talked a little bit about some of the differences that arose in the Indian community initially, but in the future going forward, what piece of advice do you have for Indians who are coming in from India, the next generation maybe, on how they can work together and form a strong Indian community?
Actually, when we first came here, we were all Indians, and we were Indians for 5, 6, 7 years. Afterwards, as the population grew, the separation became much more evident. The Gujaratis started their own association, Tamils started their own, Telugus started their own. And there was a big separation at that time. And when we were trying to found this ICC house, the Gujarati said, no, we won't give you any money, we want our own house, Gujarati house. And they did have a Gujarati house. And there were much more differences at that time. Recently I am finding that after all those old peoples are going away and the younger generation is coming up, they are more Indians and there's less difference that you are a South Indian or this Indian, and ICC is getting stronger now, and those corporate, separate state institutions or state organizations, they are losing their power and ICC is getting stronger. So basically I think that give next 5, 10 years, we will become Indians in United States. May not be in India, but in United States will be more homogenized than we were 10 years ago. Actually, I'm very, very happy to see that the differences are going down now.
Wonderful. Now, growing up, all of us are busy. Yet, when you came to the US, it's very clear that you, apart from being busy and having kids with work, you were able to find time and get involved with a lot of cultural and also political affiliations where the concerns and the interests of India were promoted because of the group that you were involved with. What do you have to say for the younger generation who are hesitant to get involved with the cultural associations or spend time with political associations, saying that they don't have time and their time is better spent at home with kids or at work? What would you tell them? Why should they invest their time in organizations like this?
That's an interesting question, and the thing is that you will always be a Indian. I mean, gradually there will be assimilation, but that assimilation will take another 50, 60 years. Like in your age, there is no assimilation as yet. The more and more people will marry Americans, and as a matter of fact, the importance of religion will go down. But as far as your age groups are concerned, I am seeing the young people who are spending time. Like I recently was in charge of the election for the ICC, and they were all young people and they were very much interested in running ICC. Then I have seen for many years back, and like that, I mean, even everywhere I am seeing the young group, like Chamber of Commerce, there are young people coming up, like you are also getting involved. Mm-hmm. So you have to get some time out. I mean, I know that the family is very important, and at that time we were not giving so much importance to the family as we were more socially involved. But coming with the American culture now, the family is becoming more and more important. and more people are spending more time with the children than we used to. But still, I think that we have to get time out. We need to get involved in all these like Indo-American Charity Foundation, DAIA, which is a very important organization, and there are others. I do not believe too much giving money to the people who come from outside and ask the money here, like Pratham or Ekal Vidyalaya and all those things. I think that that's not our job. Now, as a matter of fact, there is a lot of poverty